Hello, and welcome to our lesson on environmental and ethical issues in SCM. This segment will cover screening suppliers for good environmental performance. Supplier screening involves using questionnaires to ensure compliance with international standards and specialized assessment tools. Pre-qualification questionnaires, PQQs, are commonly employed for this purpose, gathering data on suppliers' financial, technical, and environmental capabilities. For instance, the UK's NHS utilizes the Supplier Evaluation Performance Evaluation question set, which sets a benchmark for supplier assessment in both the public and private sectors, with adaptability for private sector applications. Compliance standards. Such standards include EU eco-labels and those awarded by the International Organization for Standardization, ISO. Eco-labels are an internationally accepted way of differentiating products from an environmental perspective. Although aimed primarily at domestic consumers, the scheme can also be useful for professional purchasers. The EU eco-labeling scheme uses a product lifecycle approach involving the following stages: pre-production, production, packaging and distribution, utilization, disposal. For each stage, environmental effects are considered according to 8 criteria: waste relevance, noise, air contamination, water contamination, effects on ecosystems, consumption of energy, consumption of natural resources, soil pollution and degradation. EMAS, Eco Management and Audit Scheme, is a voluntary initiative governed by EC 1221/2009, succeeding European Commission Regulation 761/2001. It aims to recognize and incentivize organizations to surpass basic legal requirements, enhancing their environmental performance. Similar to ISO 14000 and 9000, EMAS mandates a periodic, at least once every 3 years, thorough audit of an organization's environmental management system by an accredited EMAS verifier. Participant organizations must publish an environmental policy, serving as a robust foundation and guide for their management system, setting higher standards compared to ISO 14000 and ISO 9000 policies. Questionnaires pose a risk, as responses from suppliers may go unchecked by the procurement organization. Dependence solely on environmental standards is also problematic. Knight illustrates this with a timber supplier meeting ISO 14000 criteria due to their wood treatment methods, yet failing to consider the source of their trees, believing themselves environmentally responsible. Ericsson's supplier environmental requirements stipulate the following: Environmental Management System, EMS. Supplier must have an environmental policy based on current environmental analysis for continual improvement. Supplier must identify and document significant environmental aspects. Environmental aspects must be integrated into the operational system. Supplier must have an environmental improvement program with defined objectives and action plans. Compliance with environmental legislation and common practices is mandatory. Adequate and documented environmental education for employees is required. Possession of an environmental certification, such as ISO 14001, is preferable. Supplier must provide life cycle data for processes and products upon request. Design for environment and manufacturing. The supplier must be able to demonstrate design activities to minimize its product's environmental impact during their entire life cycle by considering energy and materials use and end-of-life treatment efficiency. The supplier must comply with the requirements in the Ericsson lists of banned and restricted substances. The supplier must not use any substances, including process chemicals, on Ericsson's lists of banned and restricted substances. Substitute substances on the observation list when technically, economically, and environmentally feasible alternatives are available. Product information. The supplier must be prepared to declare, in accordance with Ericsson standards, the material content of products delivered to Ericsson. The supplier must be prepared to provide information concerning the process for handling and treating delivered material upon its end of life. Transport. The supplier is expected to minimize the environmental impact of transportation by using surface transport, truck, sea, and rail, whenever possible. The supplier is expected to use fuel-efficient vehicles when transporting goods for Ericsson. The supplier must be prepared to provide information about the environmental aspects of the transportation of goods to Ericsson, for example, transportation type, packaging material, and production locations. This is the end of our lesson. This course is presented to you by South Europe College. Thank you for listening, and see you on our next lesson.